Hello and welcome to my marketing automation for beginners video guides. Short, snappy views into what you can do with automation without any of the fuss. Today I want to look at the General Data Protection Regulations, or the GDPR for short, and the issues marketing departments will face moving forward. Now, unless you've lived under a stone with no access to any form of media, you will by now have a good understanding as to what GDPR actually means. But you may not yet have considered how it will impact you and what you need to change. Remember, GDPR is ultimately good. It will force all marketeers to stop and think about their data subjects or contacts to you and I. Meaning you will need to work harder at considering your contacts and their context, delivering a better journey. Ultimately, this will lead to lower marketing costs and better ROI. Win-win, right? Before we begin, a few key principles first. So firstly, GDPR is the successor to the Data Protection Act, and it's actually less about marketing permissions than people realise. The ICO defines 8 key principles under the GDPR. You need to make sure you know them, and I'll run through them with you in just a moment. The rules, in the most part, apply to B2B and B2C, and I'll come on to that shortly. GDPR does not only apply to the marketing department, but from my perspective, this is the only area I can really comment on. Almost every marketing department will have to change their approach in some way, so listen up. The good news is Force 24 has taken the opinion that it will do all it can to reach beyond the minimum requirements of an automation platform and deliver a solution to you that makes marketing compliance as easy as possible. We've specifically looked at each of your new requirements and either built a policy or developed a technical solution to help you manage your obligations. So let's take a look at your new obligations. Firstly, fair and lawful. This is the entire premise of GDPR really, and states we must firstly collect only the data we need. We must have legitimate grounds for collecting it. We must disclose in a privacy policy exactly what we will do with that data and how we will handle it. Oh, and the best part, you must not do anything unlawful. That's my favourite part, it actually says that. So basically only collect what you absolutely need, and the most important part is your privacy policy. You must manage and maintain a really strong, accurate privacy policy that defines exactly what will happen to any data submitted or collected. Purpose and adequacy. In the interest of speed, I'll cover these two off together. To make life easy, you need to make sure you only retain or collect the information you can justify as being reasonable to hold. So, for example, as a footwear retailer, when I sell you a pair of shoes, it's quite handy for me to have your shoe size. But to also ask and store information like, what's your waist size, is simply creating an issue I don't need to face. Accuracy. It's about maintaining up-to-date records. Fairly obvious really, but each business will consider that its own context in this regard. Retention. How long should I keep this information, and how long will it remain relevant to me? So, in the example of a footwear retailer, I can assume the average person buys a pair of shoes every 6 months, and I will, in the instance of an adult, say the shoe size remains a constant. So, if you've not bought shoes from me in, say, 3 to 4 buying cycles, I would suggest it's no longer necessary to hold the personal information relating to the shoe size we hold on the contact. It's not to say I have to remove him or her altogether. They might be happy reading my emails. You can put in your privacy policy a retention policy, but it must be reasonable. Rights. We now all have rights. This is where B2B and B2C are closely aligned. Your contacts now get rights. As a data subject, you have the right to request free of charge and effective within 28 days the following from you: a right of access, a right to object to processing, a right to prevent processing for direct marketing, a right to object to decisions being made by an automated means, a right in certain circumstances to have inaccurate personal data rectified, a right to claim compensation for damages caused by a breach of the Act. Suffice to say, with the exception of the right to claim compensation, these can all be handled by marketing automation. We can facilitate all of the above easily and free of charge. Remember, this is only from within the marketing department. How customer services team will handle this request is a different matter. So, back to the key principles. Security and international. Let's tackle these two together also. So security means you will ensure the data you have and you hold remains safe, and you have adequate policies to protect the data. For example, all Force24 users have the option of using two-factor authentication, and you can set permissions in our portal in line with your data classification handbook. Force24 internally has extremely strict data access and management policies. That means your data is held in a secure environment at all times. How can you verify this is the case with any other provider? And international. This is really big. The GDPR states you may not, without prior consent, ship any data outside of the EEA, unless the country has a data agreement with the EU. But why would you want to send data to a small number of places approved like Argentina or Uruguay? That means that sending your data online to online mail providers is now prohibited. The USA is not in the EEA. You may say, well, the GDPR recognizes the US Privacy Shield. But this requires individual companies in the USA to sign up for it and, more importantly, maintain that agreement. The USA has a challenging record with data agreements. Remember the Safe Harbor Agreement? As a legal framework, that collapsed in October 2016. The simple principle is do not ship data outside of the EEA. Why would you want to when it can all be processed here? The entire Force24 infrastructure is held within the UK. No data can be accessed outside of the UK, which, let's face it, post-Brexit, the EEA will likely become the UK. So that covers the 8 principles of GDPR. So let's quickly look at some examples where, in a busy marketing department, we may breach that. The first example is using Excel, Microsoft Excel, to process data, build, let's say, a board report based on raw data. Now, not wishing to pick on Excel, but think about the process here. You have to afford your data subjects the assurance of complete data security. Editing an Excel document on your computer is not secure. It's also likely to create multiple copies of the data without you even realizing it. Let's say I download it, I edit it, and I save it somewhere. I make a change to it and I save it again. I create a backup automatically on iCloud or anywhere, again without realizing it. Within a short space of time, I've duplicated the data several times. Once I've finished, then what? I can email the data to my boss or the board. Well, for each email I create, a copy in my sent items and duplicate it in each of the inboxes of the recipients. Or even worse, I upload the data I've now segmented into an online mailing platform based outside of the EEA. Okay, seems very innocent, and how can that be a problem? Well, under the GDPR, each of those contacts now has got the rights I mentioned earlier. And let's just think about that. You've got all of those copies floating around. That's going to be a nightmare to manage. Or let's imagine one of your contacts invokes your right to erasure and you accidentally miss his or her record from one of the files and upload them again into your mailing platform. That's just not good enough anymore. It's important that a procedure is carried out in the first place, but also you have a fallback. In the Force24 system, we hash the contact's email address and ensure you cannot send to them or use that record ever again. So, what should you be doing? Well, this is easy. A single marketing platform that allows you to hold all of your data, build your reports, segment and execute campaigns all in one place. Automate processes and provide a single source for your data. Oh, and be based in the UK. So, let's carry on. Let's look at consent. We often work with companies that have lost the original point of consent, and it's really important. We must keep a record of when and how we got consent from the individual. We must also keep a record of exactly what they were told at the time. Pulling email lists up and down from online mailing platforms is a problem because of what I mentioned earlier, but you often lose track of the original consent. Now, I want to focus on B2B marketing for a second. In B2B, we have all relied on the Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulations, PECR, which allows us to send emails to representatives within organisations directly addressing the organisation. This will remain the same under GDPR. However, the ICO are waiting to rule on a small crossover held here with personal information. So for example, my email address may be firstname.lastname@force24.co.uk. This now constitutes as personal information. The current position states you may email and process my information on the grounds of legitimate consent. But let's wait for further clarification and reserve judgment until then. The next part, shipping data outside of the EEA. Force24 represents but a handful of automation platforms based in the EEA, and even better, we're in the UK. Uploading your data to online mailing providers is classed as shipping personal data outside of the EEA, so be very careful. One last thing, which is really a tip, and that constantly strive for re-permissioning on everything you do in the marketing department. Content and value-add marketing is designed to attract new contacts, but it should also be used for re-permissioning my existing. Let's keep only the best and let's keep re-permissioning that data constantly. It can only be a good thing. Remember, I am not a GDPR practitioner and I can give you only my own anecdotal advice. If you need any help or have any questions, please feel free to contact us and we will direct you to our own GDPR consultant. We look forward to seeing you on a product demo soon. Thank you very much.